Richard Skipper celebrates. Every show is a celebration. Each show, Richard delivers the artists you love, showcasing what makes them unique. Never gossipy. The antidote to a sometimes hectic world. Now, here's your host, Richard Skipper.
Happy Friday, everyone, and welcome to the latest edition of Richard Skipper Celebrates. For those of you who are here for the first time, welcome. My show is about celebrating artists and their body of worth. And when I say artist, they're artists from all walks of life. And I am so excited about today's guest, which I will talk about in just a moment. If you are here for the first time and you enjoy today's show, I hope that you will subscribe to Richard Skipper Celebrates on my YouTube channel. This show is all about celebrating. And also hit the like button and leave a comment and let our guest and myself know today what you think about today's show. I'm a very spiritual person, and I have a positive full moon book club that I do on the full moon of each month. And I discovered An's book, and I reached out about interviewing her on the full moon of this month. She, fortunately, and unfortunately, was not available to join me on that date. And she said we could either do the next full moon or do this. One thing that I have to say, and kudos on to you, because before she said yes, she checked me out. And I appreciate that. It gives me a vote of confidence that after going and looking at my body of worth, that she said yes to me. So it's a true honor that you're here today, An.
Thank you so much, Richard. It's great to be on your show. And I kind of believe in that because I feel like, it's important to get to know who you're going to be talking with, who you're going to be on a show with, and to have an idea a little bit about who that person is. And, there are certainly times that I would say no to somebody because I just know there's not maybe the right connection, or they may not be coming from a very good place or things like that. And so I stay open and I like to do a diversity of people, but at the same time, I also like to make sure it's a good match for both of us.
But An, don't you think that that's true of every aspect of our lives? I think that very few people now are taking the time to get to know their neighbors, the people that they're dealing with. We live in such a knee-jerk society now, thanks to social media and other elements, that when people sit down and they see a post, they will hit the like button before they've even thought about what it is that they're liking. Just because the person may be a friend, a comment that's there or something. I think that people are not really taking the time to get to know each other these days. Do you agree with that?
I think that's definitely true. I mean, if you look around, how many people really, like you say, even know their neighbors? We get on autopilot and we just think, okay, everybody's post here is okay. And I'm even guilty of that sometimes because I'm trying to support somebody. I know their work is good, but honestly, I don't have time to read 2,000 or 3,000 posts a day. And so, I'm guilty of it from time to time, but I do my best to get through them. But I do definitely like to have an idea of my environment. And I think, especially with the type of work I do, it encourages that awareness, that aspect of knowing who is with you, who is around you, what's going on. And these are all really, really important parts of knowing and giving us information for how we need to be able to be. Because if you don't know the people around you, if you don't know the people that you're dealing with on a consistent basis, then you really can't be your best in many ways. Because you're limiting yourself, you're limiting them. And in that process, it's like not being present. It would be like sitting down and having a conversation with you and never looking at you and just having a cell phone in my face or a book in front of my face. I mean, I wouldn't have a clue what was going on. So
Well, I'm sure you've been in a restaurant where you'll see families where everybody's got their phone and they're not even looking at each other. I have a friend, and he actually has a great thing. When he goes out with his friends, everyone, this of course was pre-pandemic. I don't know what the situation is now, but everyone has to put their phone in the center of the table. And the first cell phone that goes off, that person has to pick up the check for everybody.
Oh, nice. I
And I
think
think
I
it's a
just
great
turned my
idea.
cell phone off altogether.
Exactly. But I want to ask you, I mean, I want to put things in perspective with where we are right now. We are slowly emerging through the doors of COVID. I don't know what's on the other side of those doors. None of us do right now. But today, I'm in the theater, and today marks 426 days since our theaters shut down. So that's the way that I gauge everything. And I want to know what your life was like 427 days ago before everything began to shut down. And it's very interesting as I'm reading your book, which we are definitely going to talk about. It's very, forgive me for the word I'm about to use, uncanny how your writings for today really reflect what we're dealing with today.
Well, and it's funny, and I always have people that say, and she's writing this like a year ago. It's not like she's writing it in the middle of knowing what's happening. And I think that's what amazes people. Certainly prior to this, I was sitting to everything happening last year. I was sitting in a position really having to step in fully to trust this work because I was at a position where I needed to make the transition to focus on this fully. I couldn't do it. And of course, like many things in life, if you're not honoring what you need to do, circumstances make you do it anyways. I got knocked out of income sources because of physical challenges that I was dealing with, and which was the result of car accidents and things
Well,
like that.
let me go there for a moment. I mean, you pretty much are without food, almost losing your home. You lose your beloved cat, which you talk about in the book. Your mother passes away. You're dealing with your sister and her illness and everything. All of this is happening at the same time when you're trying to live your own life, and that's not a reflection on everything that's going on with everyone else. But how do you balance everything at this point?
Yeah, and I think that's the interesting piece is certainly for those that aren't familiar, and I'm sure we'll get into these different components, I'm actually a walk-in, which means I'm a soul that stepped into another soul's body. And that soul that was here before me is part of my team that I work with, my soul team. And she's incredible. She's amazing. And yeah, she went through a lot of experiences for this work to come out in the world. And in that process, there are things that, as they say, as you master things in life, that a lot of pain goes away. You're able to handle things, you're able to deal with things. But there's also certain things that may not go away because there's certain things that might be completely physical. Um, but even that, I'm working on healing these days. So that's a good thing. That's a positive thing. I think when you're in the midst of these situations, you can go a lot of different directions. You can go into absolute survival, you can go into panic mode, you can go in a lot of different directions depending on where you're at or your personality or your ability to keep your mind together. And the soul that was here before me, her name was Jessie.
Mm-hmm.
And she had a good way of keeping her mind together. And when you're in the middle of something, it brings you so present that you're not thinking necessarily 2 or 3 years down the line in those moments. You're thinking about what do I need to do right now? What do I need to do in this moment? What's going to get me through the winter? What is going to get me through this incident? What is going to, help me deal with these emotions or feelings or whatever it is? that's going on. And it's hard. Like where she was with everything was very, very hard because I had the ability to observe things because I was on that sort of watch over of everything at that point. And in that process, she didn't really have that space to settle down in and grieve. She didn't, she didn't have some of those opportunities that you would have in regular life.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that when you look at those challenges, you take hold, you do the best you can, and you say, look, I'm doing the best I can. Maybe there were better or worse choices that I could have made, but in the spectrum of things, I've always done the best I could in the moment with what I had to work with.
It's interesting that we're having this conversation right now because I belong to a book group where we're now studying. I don't know if you're familiar with Julia Cameron, who wrote The Artist Way. Incredible book that I highly recommend to everyone out there. And we're working on a book now called The Listening Path. And she's talking about our higher power, that spiritual realm. And when people hear higher power, soul, stepping into another person's body or space, there's a lot of woo-hoo moments going on with people. Skeptics. What do you say to those skeptics? Or do you say anything to those skeptics?
Well, I think that it's one of those pieces that you start to just open up to naturally. And I think everybody opens in their own time. And for some people, they're going to need some experiences that connect them with it. And I think those experiences will always show up. And then there's other people that just naturally are like, I know I'm got this soulful aspect. I know that I'm able to have intuitive things happen. I know that I have these synchronicities. And
That's the word.
I think that that's the key, is that there are these synchronicities, and whether you want to call that your higher self, or you want to call that God, or you want to call that serendipity, or whatever you want to call it, there is a coming together of different pieces and different influences that are going to line up, and they're going to match up. And by whatever name you call it, you're dealing with something that is not necessarily a physical piece. And I think that sometimes can kind of help place it to people. It's just like any mother who knows when her child is in trouble, whether she's with that child or not. She has that instinct about her. She has that ability to sense things, to know things. And so in that process, you can't deny it. We all have those experiences. And I think it's just a matter of really finding that piece that connects for somebody in there. And like when Jesse was going through things, there's a lot of surrendering. There's a lot of, when you're having to survive in a vehicle in minus 30 and minus 40 degree temperatures, you're not worrying about what's happening next year. You're not even thinking that. What you're thinking about is, I may or may not wake up in the morning and it's going to be okay either way. And going into that state of peace. And that was one of the things that I think that she just was able to find over and over again, was just to say, it's okay either way. And if I'm meant to be here, I'll be here. And if I'm not meant to be here, I'm not going to be here. And we just don't think about these things, because at any day, at any moment, it doesn't matter how safe or what our living conditions are or anything else, we can be gone in an instant. And so that's where I just kind of open those doors up, and I just say,
speaking of doors being open, don't you find that most people, the chaos, especially look at the country we're living in right now, that it's happening because those doors are being shut, those windows are being shut, people are not open to possibilities. I look at this past year and I think of it as a pause. I think it's a time for us to pause and think about those things that we had in our lives that are no longer here, the things that we want in our lives, the things we don't want in our lives. I was talking to a friend of mine this morning, and she says, I have not had a hug in over a year. And that's what she's thinking about right now, the fact that she hasn't had a hug. And most people are thinking about where their next job is going to come from. With everything that's going on right now, I think that it's a matter of the openness. What advice do you give to people in terms of being able to tap into this and to be able to be more open and to go with the flow? As I said in my post before we went live, there are different codes, and we're going to talk about those codes, that are reflective based on what's going on in the world, where we are, how we respond to them. All of those elements are swirling around us. I think of it as like a kaleidoscope that's floating over our heads at all moments. What are your thoughts about that in terms of people opening up to what's there?
Well, and I think with these pieces, anytime you come into an aspect of crisis, you come into an aspect of trauma, which a lot of people have been through over the last year, pieces that challenge them, pieces that leave you not really knowing, am I going to be here, or am I not going to be here, or what's going to happen, or not having control over things. And these things are a call, really. They're a beckoning to us to say, hey, you're off track a little bit. As a collective, maybe not just, maybe or maybe not individually, but at least as a collective, you're off track, and you got to get your priorities back in order. Because as a collective, we've shifted our priorities to things that maybe aren't so important. So whatever you go through in life, whether that is losing a home, whether that is going through like the pandemic we've been through in the last year, it's going to make you stop and think a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is one of the key pieces, and that's one of the key pieces we want to think about as things are shifting and moving and reopening and all of these things, is what is really important.
Mm-hmm.
What really are the true pieces? Is it all this material stuff around us? Or is it that hug? Is it that connection? Is it that communication? Is it the other experiences that are out there? So when this comes around, I think it's really this opening up, and it's hard because just like anything, when you've done something for a certain period of time, and then you no longer have to do that, and you shift to doing something else, it takes a little bit of time to adjust. So you start with the people that you're comfortable with, maybe. You start with those people that you feel okay giving a hug to. And then you start to branch out, because we really have to learn to come together.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't matter what side people are standing on in regards to issues or political parties or anything like that. This is a time where we are going to have to unify. And we're going to see a lot more of that coming up in 2022, that we're going to have to drop these differences, and we're going to have to stop fighting with one another.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to have to come together, and we're going to have to say, this is more important. This is our key priority right now. And we're going to have to come into the core issues. So I think this opening up is sometimes small steps. It's just like somebody who's been through abuse or addiction or anything out there. You have to take it in these small steps. You don't just necessarily, some people can cold turkey, some people have that ability, but most people, they need to take little steps along the way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If you're going to rehabilitate after having an injury, you don't go out and run a marathon. You take a few steps and you build up to it, and then eventually you're walking, and then eventually you're running, and then you go on. So that's kind of my suggestion in a situation like this, is you always have to honor your own pace. And there are going to be some people that you can jump head first in, feet first in, and just dive right in with them, and be there and take advantage of that. being able to do that. But then there's other situations that you may need to take it slowly. So you have to honor where you're at on a day-to-day basis, on a person-to-person basis, and then go from there.
Well, I want to talk both about your journey on and about Jesse's journey. When you came into Jesse's life and world, were you always there, or was it just the right moment that her vessel opened to allow you to come into her life at that point?
Well, I, like all of the Magi team, had been been watching over her this whole life, sometimes on the edge of our seats, sometimes wondering, "Oh god, I don't know if she's gonna make it through this one." Um, and staying open. But when Orly came in to be with her, that's when we kind of all went on this high alert, and we all said,
Really,
"Okay, we're on full
everyone.
guard now."
Yes.
So that's where we really started monitoring closely with her. And we knew the danger. We knew the risk Orly was taking. We knew the type of body that Orly was incarnating into was not fun to incarnate in, to say the least. And so we just stayed close through that process.
Mm-hmm.
And fortunately, Orly did bring the codes into her, did get that opened up, and did help that memory of more of where she was connected. And then as time went on and she went through the various experiences along the way, and we hit a point where we knew we had to get her out because there was danger. There was definite danger involved.
Mm-hmm.
And we said, if we don't get her out, this is going to be less than not pretty, to say the least. And that's where I came in, and she knew ahead of time she might be getting a walk-in. She didn't know who, she didn't know the details behind it. And it had to be somebody that could seamlessly come in and take things over. We couldn't throw any walk-in into the body because of the code work.
Mm-hmm.
That's something very specific to our team and what we do. And so it really had to be somebody from our team. And that's where I came in. And I was very fortunate as a walk-in because I had time to be with her for about 2 months, almost 2 months. And so that was a real gift. It gave me a chance to really get to know people, for her to show me things, for her to fill me in on everything. And as a result of that, that made things very seamless in regards to the outer world, which was nice. But then when she left, there was really this kind of almost emptiness inside of me. There was these components that were, it's like a friend that goes away. You've had them there for a long time, and then they're not there.
Mm-hmm.
And so I could really feel that difference. And then, of course, my body had to get used to me. The body had to get used to me being in there versus Jesse being in there,
Mm-hmm.
and all of those shifts. And so this whole seamless kind of process on one hand, and yet knowing all these other details on the other hand, and having about a handful of people that knew what was going on. And so yeah, it was quite a shift and an adjustment, and I had to take some time after getting the book out. At that point, after I finished that, I
Now,
took a couple of days and went away for a while.
is this the third volume of the book?
This actually, the first one came out in 2018.
Okay.
So there's 2018, 19, 20, 21 is the fourth one. And I'm in the process of getting the 2022 book done now. So it's kind of like I'm in 1 year, also a year ahead. And so the 2022 book will come out in a good time this year, which I'm really excited about. And that will be the 5th year out. So
for those who are just tuning in or everything, can you explain to everyone what the code is? And I know that the code is based on modalities from different religions and aspects of spirituality. Can you break down the code, for everyone who's tuning in right now?
Yes, to try to kind of simplify it, it's a blend of over 50 different modalities, of belief systems, practices, tools, things like that. And I work a lot with numbers and with letters and with words. And those things I take, and I'm basically with this whole blend of different tools, none of which I use in the traditional way, then get kind of translated into my own language and what's happening, and then that gets translated back out into the human English language where I can communicate it. And so that's kind of the simplified version. So the codes in essence are kind of like a language, but they're energy patterns. And so when I'm talking about them in the book, I'm really explaining what the energy patterns are on a day-to-day basis, on a month-to-month basis, on a yearly basis. And it's to help people understand what the currents are. And then they can take hold and they can work with those currents and they can see, okay, this is what's happening. And it's not so much about saying you have to do A, B, C, and D during your day. It's about here's the currents. Now, what are you going to do with it? I'm going to invite you to take a step, to ponder something, to be curious about something, to give something some thought, and to trigger some just concepts of thinking, what about this or what about that, or seeing how these pieces come together, because we have such a massive amount of things interacting all at one time. There'd be no way to cover it all. The human brain can't process it that fast and that much of every detailed little piece. But in this process, we can grasp enough of the energy and the core pieces of it to know, okay, this is a day that maybe I shouldn't force trying to make things happen. This is my day to sit back and rest a little bit. This is my day that is really not about mental work. I need to do a different type of work today. Or if I have to go out and drive, I need to be extra careful on certain days or things like that. So kind of gives us that foresight, that warning, that heads up. So you kind of are geared up for your day in a way. That's kind of the way I look at it. Like, okay, I know what I'm in for today because I know people are going to be irritated or they're going to be kinder or they're going to be this or they're going to be that. So it helps me know how to approach people. It helps me to know what type of space to put myself in. And what's really cool is it just has this way of matching people wherever they're at on their journey.
Mm-hmm.
And you're never going to outgrow this work. I can tell you that right now. It doesn't matter how evolved you are, how far you are in your journey, or how new you are in your journey. You're never going to outgrow this work. And it's simple and it's easy to use. And you might go through the same lesson 2 or 3 or 5 or 20 times, but you might grab a different piece out of it each time because a different word might jump out at you or a different thing might just connect with something that you're experiencing at that time.
Well, let's talk about two modalities that people are familiar with, because a lot of what you're describing right now sounds very much like numerology and astrology. What are the similarities and what are the differences?
In regards to what I do with the code
Yes,
work,
yes.
so a lot of what I do deduce down into numbers because numbers and letters all tell a story. Every one of them has full stories, and then how they interact, how they relate to each other, the context that they're in has all these deep layers to it.
Now, let
So
me ask you, excuse me for interrupting, but does destiny or predestiny play into this at all? Or is that not the way that it unfolds?
um, well, there's always multiple possibilities within a code pattern. So it's not just that it's always going to be good or always going to be bad. It depends on whether somebody's in a distortion or whether they're really strongly divinely aligned, or you have all these different kind of layers and components to it, or it could go two different ways. The same thing could go two different ways for two different people. So it has a lot more flexibility in it maybe than some of the standardized systems do. And so I think that that's part of it in there.
Mm-hmm.
with
What
that
I mean
aspect.
is, for example, when you came into Jesse's life and the walk-in took place, that
Mhm,
was a specific date and time that happened.
mhm, mhm.
Was that predestined, or was that something that she was all of a sudden ready for this transition to happen?
It wasn't necessarily predestined. We didn't know if that was going to be necessary or not until it got closer to that time. Um, we can look at that in anything. Now, we are born into existence. So I have to deal with the same codes in many ways that Jesse had being here because they're connected to my physical body. They're connected to my incarnation as a human being when that came about. So our birth date is really a key point that represents our codes that we have for life.
Mm-hmm.
And then every year we go through a new personal year, and that's happens when our birthday hits. So we do have we have our life cycle kind of aspect, and then we have yearly cycles that are going on. And this is why you can have, you know, also two people, for example, that are born on the same day, same time, same place, and still have different personalities because they have different names,
Mm-hmm.
because they have different other components that they're dealing with. They live in different homes,
Mm-hmm.
things like that. So astrology would say they're all going to be the same, but in the codes, we know they're not the same. So just because you're a Scorpio or a Taurus or a Leo or a Gemini or whatever you are,
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't mean you're all going to be the same. In different years, we carry different code patterns for the year. So there's all these layers to it that make it individualized. And I think that that's one of the interesting things is that we both have our own path that we're on, and we have a shared path that we're on. So we have all these multiple paths that things can go. So there's destiny and there's not destiny simultaneously,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because there's a destiny for every choice and
Exactly.
every path
Mm-hmm.
in there. And so that's kind of where that comes from. So it's not all totally predestined, but yes, there is a destiny in the aspect that you're going to deal with certain currents. So I could go to any point in time and pull the energy for that time
Mm-hmm.
and know what that kind of dynamic is going to be like.
Well, I want to ask you, we talked earlier in the interview about the vetting process of how we approach people and, really checking them out, getting to know them and everything. Has all of this really affected the way your interactions with everyone else on the planet? Is it something that you're always thinking about?
Oh, my mind you don't want to be in.
Mine either. Mine
People
either.
sit down and talk to me for an hour or an hour and a half in a consultation sometimes, and they're like, wow. And I go, well, welcome to my head 24/7. But it does change my interactions.
Mm-hmm.
And I like to think that it's changed them for the better. And I say that because I have a better understanding of what I need to do for myself. And when I have that better understanding of what I need to do for myself and what I'm going through, then I can connect with people better. It changes it because when I know that the tensions are high and I know people are going to be under stress or anxiety patterns on a particular day, I can set my disposition to be a little calmer. I can set my disposition to know what the pulse is or the need is for that day
Mm-hmm.
and say, okay, so instead of getting caught up in all these reactions, I can just stay centered and mastered, so to say, um, and not react. I can respond to things. I can calm people down. I know, okay, this person, when they get stressed, is going to go this way. This person, when they get stressed, is going to go that way. Um, so it definitely changes the way I deal with people because I think it's brought in a lot more compassion. It's brought in a lot more understanding. It's brought in a lot more patience. It's, settled down in my human self the need to rebel in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
So this whole aspect of being able to approach people with a sense of understanding, and I think that's huge.
Mhm. Well, obviously, I mean, you've got everything on paper in terms of breaking down each day, each week, each month. It's really amazing. I love it. I love this book. Um, and each morning when I do my morning pages with Julia Cameron, this has now become part of my morning routine in terms of looking at the day. Um, I want to know what your thoughts are on how all of us, everyone who's watching right now, everybody who will be watching later, will be able to implement these plans into their own lives in terms of how we're dealing. We live in a world right now because of social media and the news cycle. We're getting news at a rapid pace, faster than in any other time in our history. And people are reacting instead of taking a pause and thinking about the best way to approach each thing. What advice do you give to everyone who's really watching right now in terms of implementing these plans into their lives?
I think first of all, it's you, again, you do it at your own pace. Everybody kind of finds what works for them with this book. A lot of people like to read it in the morning before they really get started into their day so that they do have that foresight to work with. Um, but I think it's also that heads up, because as things are coming up in the day, I'll have people, they'll go back and they'll read things, you know, when things come up during the day, and they'll go back and they'll go, oh gosh, this makes total sense now. Now I know where that person's coming from. Or now that I know that, you know, this trigger is connected to a particular thing versus a different thing. It's connected to um, feeling insecure versus feeling afraid, or these sorts of pieces. So it really makes sense of a lot of things. And I think that's one of the appeals of this work, is that it helps people go, oh yeah, now I understand what's behind this. Now I understand what the currents are. Now I understand why this unfolded, or what was connected behind that. And you know, again, it kind of gives you that heads up, because it's amazing how when different things happen in people's lives, that they can come back and say, okay, this is the day that I needed to be forgiving, so this is actually a genuine misunderstanding, versus another day, had this happened, then I know they might have been coming from lying and deceitfulness or things like that. So it also helps us to start to understand the true character of people. And I think that it also helps us to come so much into command of our own life. And that's a really amazing things, like the journeys I've seen people take, the changes, the shifts that they've made along the way from doing this work. And to implement it, this book is written in a way that you can just integrate it right into your daily life. It's not like you have to stop and go, okay, I've got to make sure that I make a certain type of tea today and it's, you know, done this way and steeped for X amount of minutes. You
Yeah.
don't have to really do that with this work. It naturally integrates in. All you need to do is grasp the concepts of, this is a day that's centered around kindness. This is a day that's centered around humanitarian projects. This is a day that's centered around that. And you can kind of go, great, I have A, B, C, and D that I need to do. So I can bring that right into here. And it's more of your way of being in the world than it is having to do a specific task. You're really choosing the task. And it's really taking your mind and it's unwinding a lot of programming that's been placed in the mind. And it gets people thinking for themselves. And it gets people looking at things from different perspectives, which I think is so valuable and so important. And there's a lot of times I hear that from people where they say, I never thought to look at it that way.
Hmm.
I never thought to put those pieces together, or to think how this piece influenced that piece. And so those are the beautiful aspects. And when I see somebody go from being very much into materialism to being able to say, nope, this isn't important anymore. I don't have an attachment to it. This is more important for me. Um, nope, I don't need to, do these really expensive things. I can do this and be just as happy with it. I think that this getting in contact with self, when I see people who have been insecure in themselves, uncertain about themselves, remaining in a certain victim pattern or things like that because of experiences that they've had in their life. And then they come out and now they're being proactive. They're standing up saying, no, you're not going to treat me this way. They're coming back
Well,
and
I
they're,
mean, we're seeing that major shift going on in the world right now, with the Black Lives Matter movement, with diversity in casting in film and television and Broadway, producers that have gone through their entire careers treating the people that they deal with less than. All of this is coming to the forefront. Is
yeah.
this some, excuse me for going here, cosmic path that we're all on together right now?
Yeah, well, and here, this is where we get into those year influences, the global, the generational influences. And we are, as a human species, as the times that we are in very critical times that we're going to have to make choices to either create these transformations and stop being in all this division, or we're going to make ourselves extinct. It's really as simple as that in many ways. And so we need to consider some of these bigger components and these bigger pieces. So absolutely, we're all, as a collective human race, being given this opportunity of, what are we going to do with this situation? We're all going to be in this, you know piece of experiencing this time together, these influences
I'd like
together.
to know what your thoughts are on why you think the divisiveness is as heightened as it is right now.
Well, we've got the divisiveness is really coming a lot out of fear from where corruption is sitting, from where um, people who are trying to control everything
Hmm.
are sitting. And so when they get into fear, and they when you have people that are sitting in these control patterns and they don't want to let go of their control, and they're not coming from a divine alignment space, okay,
Thank you for saying
then
that. Thank you. That's
they don't want to let that control go. They don't want to let it go. They they don't want to do it, and that same energy is living in such a distortion. It's not that it's 100% evil, because if you take it and put it in its true essence, it's not evil. But it manifests as evil here in this dimension, in this plane,
Mhm.
because it's running in this distortion energy. It's been corrupted, it's been infiltrated, whatever you want to say, in there. And with that, it doesn't want people to have hope. It doesn't want people to have a sense of God in their life. It doesn't want people to know what they really are. So its path is to make that extinct. So we really are on a fight for our souls right now
Mhm.
on this planet. We really are on a fight to hold divine presence on this planet. And when you get into that kind of a component, the divisiveness is the only way to keep control.
Mhm.
If people are divided, that's the only way you can control them, especially the more they're coming into awakening, the more that they're becoming conscious of what's happening, the more the truth unfolds. And we have a lot of truth exposure going on in our world these days,
That's true.
and a lot that's coming to the surface that people, have just brushed over and not thought about, and thought, oh, this is fine, this is an innocent thing, and it's not an innocent thing. And when you start to get into those spaces, then the only option it has is to create anger, to create hate, and to create divisiveness. And this is so critical. If people could just get this, we need to set this aside.
Mhm.
We need to stop letting all of these issues of things distract us and come back into the core of treating each other with respect. It doesn't matter who you are, what race you are, what age you are, or anything else. It's going to come back to, are you living by basically these divine principles? Are you willing to support having divine presence in the world? And when we don't have truth, we don't truly have choice. And choice is a soul and a God-given gift. And when you take that away, you're also taking God away. So people don't realize the importance of some of these things that they're arguing over, and they're being drawn into these battles. They don't realize that the battles are orchestrated by people who are trying to control everybody. It doesn't matter what side of the fence you're on. It's everybody. It's not that one is 100% right and the other's 100% wrong. You got good guys on both sides. You've got bad guys on both sides. And until we start realizing that 90% of what we're fighting over, probably more than 90%, 99.999% of what we fight over is orchestrated by people who want control over all of us. And they don't care what happens to people. They don't care about you or me or what they claim to care about or what an organization is about. They don't actually care about those things. And they could care less whether you survive or you don't survive. They just want their power. And the irony in all of that is that always self-destructs. That doesn't end up working in the end because they all just turn on each other. And we see that a lot now, right? When the pressure comes up and you start seeing people turn on each other that are on the alleged same side of things. And so that's really where it comes down to me, where I think the division is. It's this fear of losing power. It's this fear of losing control in the world. And, we have to be willing to stand our ground in our own space and say, this is what's right for me. We have to stop condemning people for their choices and to stand our ground and say, this works for me. This doesn't work for me. So this place maybe supports what works for me. This place may not support what works for me. And not making everybody good and bad, but, again, coming back down and saying, really what we need to do is to stand up against what is creating the division.
Well, I think for me, it's all about everyone living their authentic selves. I think, as you just said, what's right for me, there's no conflict. If you say you can choose to wear a mask or not wear a mask, I'm only responsible for how I respond to it. And I want to ask you, obviously, you're on this incredible spiritual plane. But you're also living in the year 2021, and there's a lot of conflict all around you. Is it easier for you to acknowledge and address the conflict that you experience in life based on what you've learned up to this point? Or is it something that you're constantly aware of and in terms of the way that you deal with everything?
I try to stay very present with everything. And I think that definitely this work has helped me to handle things much better and to stay on top of things much better, because it holds me in continuously trying to stay centered on what the truth is. And again, that truth, you've got basic truths that apply to everybody. You've got my truth, and that might be different than your truth. And in the middle of this, I think it has helped me deal with things better, just because I'm maybe not wrapped up in some of the drama of it, because I look at it and say, this is drama, and this drama in general is not theater drama, obviously, but drama in general and life drama pulls me out of myself. I choose not to do that. So it's always a choice there. And we forget that power of choice. We always have a choice. Are we going to react to this? Are we going to respond to it? Are we going to play into it? Are we going to support it? That's all our choice. So as you were saying, we can like or not like what somebody says. I mean, we don't have to agree with everybody to be nice to them, and this is my thing. You don't have to agree, but you can still be kind. You may not choose to hang out with somebody, but you don't have to go around hating them and then trying to
You're freezing a little bit, but well, hopefully this is just going to go through in a moment.
create violence.
Oh, there you are again. Good. You froze for a moment, so if you can repeat what you just said.
So really, we just want to come back to realizing that we have these differences. We can have these different components, and we don't have to, we don't have to act in this aggression. Our actions are our karma. Our actions are our responsibility. And just because somebody wants to encourage you to do a certain thing doesn't mean you need to do it. And somebody can have a totally different stance on things, but that doesn't mean you have to be mean or hate them or things like that because they have a different opinion, because they have a different stance. They could be sitting at 180 from you, and that's okay. So this work, I think, really, again, it kind of goes back in what's the need for, well, let me do some research on something. Let me look a little bit deeper into something. Let me sit about what's right for me. How about if I don't judge that person why or why not they're doing something? How about if I understand that maybe they're doing the best thing for them? Maybe what I think they should be doing is not good for them at all. So, when we start to come into these components where we stop judging people just by initial reactions or looks or things like that. I mean, you could have somebody that carries a little extra weight on them, right? And what are you going to do? You're going to sit around and go, oh, that person's fat because they eat nothing but junk food. I'm sure that's all they do and they don't exercise and
the other day,
things like that. Or you could say, you know what, maybe there's an issue going on.
Yeah, absolutely. The other day there was a photograph on Facebook that someone posted, and it was people putting gas tanks in the trunk of their car, and everybody was like, piling it on those people. And I said, you don't know the full story. They could be collecting for people in the neighborhood that are not able to get to themselves. I mean, you can't make a full judgment based on a photograph that you see. And we could take any photograph, and if we choose to look for something negative, you'll find it. I think it's a choice.
Well, and one of the things I think a lot of people have started to learn over this last year is what? You can see anything on the news, on TV, as a movie clip. It being in the industry, right? You can make anything look like any story that you want it to look like. So,
or worse,
I mean,
excuse me for interrupting. I can just make something up. I can make something up about you and just post it on Facebook. Whether it's based on truth or not doesn't matter. What matters is that a lot of people will take it at face value.
Yeah. And I love that about the code journey work, really, because it encourages us to not take things at face value. Mm-hmm. It encourages us to go a little bit deeper. It encourages us to look beyond the surface of things, to realize that we do have a lot of illusions. We do have a lot of things happening. And we're in times where things are shifting and changing. And we want to keep in mind that context becomes really important, right? Because what was appropriate 100 years ago, or what's appropriate today, was not appropriate maybe 100 years ago. And different times might be considered insulting today was not insulting 100 years ago, or things like this. So we have to keep in mind the context, the wording. I mean, think of how many times there's a word that's used, and in America it has one connotation, in the UK it has a completely different connotation. And so when you think about these, I mean, you have to stop and look at the context, and we have to keep that memory. and mind. I mean, Jesse always was very in shape. I came into this body and my body did something different after I came into it. And I eat organic foods and I eat all these things. But, nobody knows that. If they just take a snapshot of me out at the market or something like that, it doesn't matter that I'm putting organic kiwi in my basket and, whole vegetables and whole foods and things like that in my basket. You know, what they're thinking is, no, somewhere she's just stuffing her face with, sweets or other things. Well, again, we only see snapshots of people.
That's right.
And this is part of, I think, this work that is so important for the collective right now, Richard, is really coming into these dynamics of looking to qualities versus physical features. And I think that that's the key part. I think that's so important for us to know right now, especially in all of these changes and next years, we're starting to balance things out and pieces like that, that we have to get into the qualities. How is somebody behaving? Okay, again, I don't care what side of the fence you're on, but if you're sitting there saying, I hope you die because you won't do things the way I'll do them, or I want to do them, or what I believe, I don't care where you're coming from. That's not okay for me. Because that's coming from a place like, I'm thinking the karma that goes on there. I'm thinking what that person's drawing into themselves. I'm thinking, this is the stuff that we've got to ease up in the world. And it starts with our own individual self. And people think, well, I can't have an influence on the world. I can't make a difference in the world. Well, you can make a difference in your own life. And every shift you make in your own life for yourself will change the world.
Amen.
So you change it by default. Really.
Well, I can't believe this, but we are at the end of our show. I want to be respectful of your time, and I also like to be respectful of the time of the people that have chosen to spend an hour with both of us. There are so many places that you could have been right now, but the fact that you chose us and to be here means the world to me. I want to tell you, this book is incredible. The Code Journey for the year 2021. And before you know it, 2022 is going to be in our hands. Before we end, I just want to thank everyone for being here. I will reiterate what I said at the beginning of the show. If you enjoyed today's show, and if you haven't done so already, please, please, please subscribe to my channel on YouTube. I'm all about celebrating artists from all walks of life and their body of worth. We are all worthy. Every person on this planet is worthy, and we need to celebrate their body of worth instead of tearing them down. I also end every show by telling everyone to go out and do something nice for somebody else without expecting anything in return. Go to your Facebook friends list, and the fifth name that pops up today, I want you to go to Amazon, and I want you to order 2 copies of this book. Keep one for yourself and send one to the fifth friend on your Facebook friends list. They'll thank you for it. But also take the time to reach out with a phone call once in a while. Not an email message, not a text message, not a private message, but a phone call, just to let the people that are in your life know what they mean to you. As a dear friend of mine says, we're all in this together, but we're not in the same boat. And you never know what someone is going through right now. But if you're going to be in that boat, it's always nice to have a skipper along for the ride. Think about that for a moment. Now, I'm going to leave the screen on. I'm giving you the platform to yourself. I'm giving you the final word today. Anything that you want to say to everyone who's watching right now about anything that we talked about today that you want to build upon, anything that we didn't talk about that you wish we had, or just any message that you want to put out to everyone who's watching right now. And again, thank you, thank you, thank you for spending an hour with me today. Thank you.
Well, it's absolutely a pleasure, Richard, to have had this time to share with you and your viewers on here. And I think really just take a moment, take a pause, consider there could be a lot more to things than what you're seeing. And even if somebody else cannot necessarily be nice to you, take the time to be nice to them, because you never know how that can change somebody's life. And I've seen it literally save lives. So I'm hoping that you'll take advantage of the code journey and that you will start your own journey and your own process and things and just see where it leads you. And it's amazing and it's incredible. And it's up to us to make the shifts and the changes here that's going to create a world that benefits everybody.